Over many years since the coming of Chaos, many warriors have risen in the name of the dark gods of Chaos. Most have devoted themselves to one god, but there are some who have pledged their souls to the powers of Chaos as a whole. These warriors rise through their ranks of their tribes, receiving boons of the 4 Chaos gods. It is rare to see such warriors, for the Chaos gods themselves do not often agree on who is a worthy champion. But nonetheless, these men and women, whilst rare, do exist. One such warrior is Wulfric the Wanderer. Born of the Saul tribe in Norsca, Wulfric, as are his kin, is a fierce warrior. Over the years, he has gained much infamy due to his skill and brutality in battle. Born with the mark of Chaos, it was clear to many that Wulfric was meant for greatness, being blessed with a supernatural strength only seen by those of the followers of the Dark Gods. The frozen lands of Norsca and many of its terrors had raised Wulfric, and with that he knew little fear, if any, in his body. From his ship the Seafang, Wulfric had led many campaigns across the known world. None were safe from the Chaos Champion's ambitions, as indiscriminately he would slay any in his path. His crew both respected him and feared him all the same, and with good reason. The gods of the north had barely blessed his outward appearance, save for his teeth being replaced by fangs which could bite through iron. One blessing he had received is that which is coveted by most of the followers of the gods of Chaos, the gift of tongues, which allowed the chosen champion to issue challenges in any language in the Warhammer world. Despite not knowing their language, he would speak fluently in their tongue for just a few moments. Wulfric is a hulking brute of a man. Some rumours spread across the world of a man far larger than others, far stronger than ogres, whose voice echoed with the thundering will of the gods. Many have sought to join his warband, for Wulfric promised many hunts, glory and battle. And for the men of Norsca, this is what they were born to do. Not much is known about Wulfric's early life, his old deeds overshadowed by far more impressive efforts each and every day. We first hear of Wulfric during one of his many famous hunts. He and the crew of the Seafang had been tracking a beast throughout the frozen wasteland for some time, and while this beast was all too aware of the fact that it was being hunted, the warriors of the Dark Gods continued to make chase under Wulfric's command, lest they face the wrath of the Wanderer himself. Only Wulfric felt no fear of fighting his enemy head-on, even as an avalanche of snow and stone swept some of his hunting party away, and disobedience rose throughout the remnants of his men. Wulfric would stand strong. He yelled at his men to stand with him, and that only under his command would they be allowed to retreat by his word alone. From the shadows behind him, rising from the snow, came the first of many yetis, one that attempted to sneak behind the Wanderer. But the beast was stupid to even attempt to hunt one of the most famous hunters the world has ever seen, for Wulfric was all too aware of what was creeping up behind him, and simply let the beast get close enough for him to catch it off guard, spinning around and slaying the monster single-handedly. The beast lay dead with little effort, but many others rose to attack the Norsemen. Wulfric would rally his men and lead them to war. These mighty beasts did not belong in Norsca, and they were fighting in the land of the hunters. Together, the men of the north under Wulfric would charge into the hulking masses of ferocious fur and flesh. Both parties were of equal number, but the yetis were far more stronger than simple men. One by one, the men of Norsca fell as their bodies were literally torn apart by these brutish beasts. They would have surely all fallen were it not for Wulfric's gift of tongues. The gift which also allowed him to speak in any language, also allowed him to speak to beasts. The yetis were stunned as a man, something so different to them, spoke to them directly. They stopped fighting as Wulfric issued one of his famous mighty challenges to the patriarch of these monsters. The beast was much larger than all the others. Its roar could be heard for many miles, and its eyes were now fixated on Wulfric. A lesser man would have cowered and ran, but Wulfric was famous for being an incredible fighter and a hunter of many unmatched talents. The Yeti was large and mighty, yes, but it was, as all the others, a stupid animal. Both would clash for what would seem to be hours, But in the end, it was the Wanderer who stood triumphant. "Skulls for the Skull Throne," he would shout, as the mighty beast lay dead, and the rest of the Yetis ran from the furious Norscan warriors. The Blood God was pleased this day, but soon enough he will demand more, as would the other gods. For the Chaos Gods have always watched Wulfric the Wanderer for many, many years, promising many boons and many treasures. This is exactly why many flocked to Wulfric's side to serve, wishing for even a slither of what was promised to him. Wulfric, on the other hand, cared not for trinkets or blessings. He was very unlike most men in general, for the hearts of men, wherever they are from, is quite fickle, and greed is the only reason why they act. The hunt was now over, and soon enough the men of Norsca would return to Seafang once again to continue their journeys. Many Norscan men lay wounded. They had served their purpose, but in the end they were deemed failures in the eyes of their gods and their peers. It was not Wulfric's place to punish them. Instead, they would be slain by their kin to meet their gods for their eternity of punishment. Back atop the Seafang, Wulfric and his warriors stood watch, as one of the fabled Norscan shamans weaved a mighty spell he had done many a time. For the famed ship rested upon a lake of ice atop the very same mountains they had done battle in. By the will of the Chaos Gods, Seafang has moved with its crew throughout many perilous locations. Many places where ships should not be able to travel to by any means. By incantations and the very blessed blood that flowed through Wulfric's veins, the ship lifted itself from the ice-covered lake and floated to its next destination. Wulfric would take no reservations on reminding his warriors on multiple occasions that it was by his blood that the Seafang moved, that he was chosen by the Chaos Gods, and that they were merely dogs until they could prove themselves. But under his guidance, and with the strictest of loyalties, they too may one day feel the gaze of their patrons and be blessed as he had. The Seafang sailed through the air, as it were in simple but calm waters. Dark clouds formed around the ship, as if they were acting as the very waves that would normally form beneath a ship as it travelled across the seas. These clouds were more nefarious than simple clouds, however, for they were shaped by the dark powers, and from the clouds many hungry eyes could be seen. Claws would on occasion spill from the clouds to take some of the Northmen as prey, for minor demons of the Chaos Gods were the reason why the ship floated. If any managed to be foolish enough or weak enough to be dragged into the shadows, so be it, for they were not worth the very wood they stood upon. The Northmen would fight for their lives alongside Wulfric. Gods only know how long they had been fighting for, but as the clouds dissipated, the smell of chaotic powers were washed away by the breeze of the seas. Many times have Wulfric and his crew made the same voyage. The sight of demonic entities was becoming all too common for the Northmen, and they would not be delayed, for Wulfric had his sights set on another prize, one which many would not ever believe. The Seafang made haste to the settlement of Onskaro, one of the many in the lands of Norsca, who despite the many horrors within the frozen wastes, they still stand tall and proud. Onskaro was impressive. Many Northmen lived there. Buildings older than humanity itself stood gleaming over the Norscans. This was as close to a paradise as men of the north could get, but this was far from the reason of Wulfric's arrival. Onskaro became the seat of the Sarls. This was his home as it was any other's. Here Viglunda, the king of the Sarls, dwelt. Wulfric had no love for this king. He was a coward and greedy, nothing like a true Northman should be. Wulfric cared not for the king's riches, his powers, or the armies he controlled. But there was one treasure that Wulfric desired. Viglunda had a daughter, and Wulfric loved her. She was beauty incarnate, and while he took no pleasure in most earthly desires, seeing her gave him great joy. And tonight, after so many days away, he may finally see her again. Tonight, Wulfric would not think about blessings, curses, hunting, or anything else for that matter. Tonight, he will enjoy himself, even for just a little bit. He and his men made their way to the Great Hall for a grand feast. only to be surprised by the sight of many Aeslings, an ancient enemy to the Sarls. Surely Viglander was planning something, but the old fool would be left to his own devices. Wulfric stood watch as the king of the Sarls welcomed him as they discussed the recent hunt in the name of the Blood God. But as much as he could argue with this foolish king, he found his mind wandering and his eyes searching for his beloved. King Vinglunda had promised her to him many times, but still he found excuses. This naturally would enrage the fierce warrior, who would have a war of words with his king as the foreigners watched and mocked. The bickering was pointless. The Sarl king was a pompous fool. Everyone knew that, and he would not argue any longer. He didn't care for any of this king's words. His lies and excuses meant nothing, for while he was in Onskaro, he would spend time with his love of loves, and nothing would stand in his way. That night he lay with Hjordis, and for a moment all was right. Those moments would not last for long, however, for his night, as every night, were plagued with terrors. Dark visions granted to him by the gods of chaos as punishment for a drunken statement he made many years ago, while ingesting more mead than any normal man could naturally drink. One should not boast under the eyes of the Chaos Gods, however, for they are known to punish arrogance, and since then he has been plagued with nightmares. These terrors would show him many places, past, present, and future. It was during this time that he had also received the fabled Gift of Tongues and the Mark of Chaos. Wulfric knew these visions meant that he had been chosen by the gods, and the places that plagued his mind would soon be places he would visit, eventually being known as one of his many famed hunting grounds. Wulfric accepted his purpose to serve at the will of the Chaos Gods. He gathered a mighty warband of warriors, but now he would need a means of transportation. No mere ship would be able to take him around the world. Some of these visions would take him far inland. He and his men would be targets to any who would see the Northmen. It was then that he sought the mystical flying ship, one of Northman creation, yet magical indeed. It was no hassle killing the witch who held control of this fabled skyship. Seafang he named it, and he has travelled with it ever since. Wulfric has travelled far across the reaches of the world over a number of years. He never wanted this life, and in truth he still doesn't. Many have told him his visions were a gift, but what gift was this? His former life taken from him. He found no pleasure in the simple things in life anymore. But Wulfric knew better than to ignore the wishes of the Chaos Gods, lest he feel their wrath. His visions took him across the world. Many times would he see cities to be burned, monsters to be slain, and offerings to be given. Each vision would be under the will of one of the Chaos Gods, and as soon as his mission would be completed, another god would send visions to him shortly after. His many years under the command of the Chaos Gods have earned him many names: the Wanderer, the World Walker, Eternal Challenger, and so much more. The more he offered to the gods, the more the peoples of the world feared his name. There was no telling when Wulfric would appear in their part of the world to wreak havoc. That is not to say that Wulfric still did not attempt to clear his soul from the powers of chaos. Secretly, he would scheme of ways to break the hold they had on him, often meeting with many wise men in hopes of returning to a normal life. Each time they would fail him, but still Wulfric pressed on, hoping for that day. At one point, a Kurgan shaman from the north appeared to the Wanderer, promising to lift his curse for a simple price. He would acquire some ancient artifacts for him and give him seafang, and in return he would break the curse of the World Walker. Wulfric would stop at nothing to finally be free and be with his beloved. He set sail with haste. Maybe this journey would be his last. Maybe he will finally be free. Unknown to Wulfric, Viglunda had been planning on this. The sooner he left, the sooner he could wed his daughter to an Aesling prince. Wulfric's journeys took him to the ocean. He explained to the shaman that seafang reacted to the blood of its captain and its captain alone. Dawi-Zharr, the witch who once held seafang, is now dead, and now the demonic energies that dwelt within the ship chose Wulfric as its new captain. Whether this was a simple lesson or a challenge to the shaman is unknown, but it did serve to amuse Wulfric. The amusement quickly left as seafang made its way into red waters. The shaman had told them the relic they sought was under the hands of the Dawi, the dwarfs, and technically that was correct. The relic was in the hands of the Dawi-Zharr. Wulfric knew the Dawi-Zharr well enough. They are a cruel people and do not take kindly to requests. This will not be an easy challenge, but a challenge nonetheless. Through the desolate realms of the Dawi-Zharr they travelled. The lands here were lifeless and fireborn. It was a wasteland like Norska, but it was not Norska. Even in the frozen lands of the north, many people lived. Many monsters dwelt. Here, those who did not serve the Dawi-Zharr fought in desperation for survival. But the men of Norska also knew hard times, and would not be defeated by even these odds. The Norskans found themselves being tracked by hobgoblins almost as quickly as they had met land. Hobgoblins are no match for the fury of the men of the north. They are weak and malnourished due to the lack of food in these lands. In their desperation, they charged Wulfric's forces, but were quickly repelled by the Kurgan's spellcasting. Whether they acted in their own initiative or served the Dawi-Zharr was none of Wulfric's concern. Quite the contrary, it may prove useful. If the fire dwarves were aware of him and his men, they could prepare, and they would be easier to kill if they were bulked up together. The paths to the Dawi-Zharr settlements were mostly clear, save for a few packs of greenskins, which would be easily dispatched. No challenge had yet presented itself, until they arrived to the outskirts of the Dawi-Zharr stronghold. There they saw the domain of the chaos-infused dwarves, many heavily armoured mutated warriors, and hundreds of greenskin slaves littered the grounds as their hobgoblin cousins acted as their slavers. If this would come to blows, it would not be easy. A plan needed to be formed. Simply charging in would mean suicide, and Wulfric was no fool. But what if the fire dwarves were too busy with their own slaves? Wulfric would order his men to cut the slaves free so that they may distract their former masters while the Northmen search for the relic. The warriors of Norska would sneak around while the greenskins fought their former oppressors. They had no time to waste, even as their position was finally given away, when Heshut, the god of the Dawi-Zharr, had finally noticed them, or so they believed. Wulfric challenged the dark god in his own language. He was not afraid of some minor deity of a greedy people. It would seem that the fire dwarves could conjure a vision of Heshut to scare their slaves. But these were men of Norska. They would not be afraid, for they were far more afraid of their own gods and the wrath of their chosen champion. Wulfric had sent some of his men into the fire dwarf stronghold. They were to release the slaves and cause as much chaos as possible. When the sound of fighting was heard, the Wanderer knew it was time to strike. He and his men would charge into the shadows, reaching closer and closer to the gate. Normally, Great Dawi gates would present a problem to any man, but the abilities of the Kurgan spellcaster that Wulfric had made his agreement with made quick work of it. The Kurgan shattered the gates of the Dawi-Zharr fortress, allowing the World Walker's forces to move in with ease. As was expected of Wulfric, he rushed in, shouting in the language of the Dawi-Zharr, calling for their leader to come out and face him if he was no coward. No word came from within, but he was met by a mighty bull centaur, which would have taken his life were it not for the skill of many battle-hardened years. He had no time to rest, for the fighting was far from over. His forces would split again. One group would stay behind and hold off any advancing Dawi, while Wulfric would lead the others deeper and deeper into the chaotic fortress. Inside, they found many horrors, but Wulfric's command was indisputable. No matter what was thrown at them, the men of Norska would continue to press on. In truth, were it not for the Kurgan, they would have surely perished. But Wulfric would not admit it. The Dawi-Zharr broke and fled, allowing the Northmen to continue. His quest was almost over. He could feel it. Deeper they pressed on. The inner buildings of the Dawi-Zharr looked like that of horrors. A realm of a mad god made manifest. But there was no turning back. Soon enough, Wulfric would face the lord of this damned place. Wulfric met the Dawi-Zharr Lord with fury which was reciprocated in kind. A mighty battle was fought. Even the World Walker himself found himself many troubles, for the leader of the Fire Dwarfs was no fool and indeed was an expert fighter. Ultimately, however, as many times before, Wulfric would be triumphant. The Dwarf Lord now dead, burnt alive in his own oven. The relic was now his, but unfortunately the Kurgan shaman perished. Wulfric had left him to his own devices, and now he was left without means to lift the curse. No matter, if one knew how to free him, surely someone else must know too. He had the relic. The Fire Dwarfs had been broken. All he needed to do was return and begin another search. Before he would do so, he would return to his men, which were left fighting to hold back the dwarfs while he went on his hunt. Some still yet lived, but one man, Sigvatar, whom had joined Wulfric many years ago and followed him on many hunts, one of the very few that the World Walker actually considered a friend, had perished during the fighting. Betrayed by the men who stood beside him, Wulfric felt grief for the first time in a very long time as he cut down his betrayers and burnt one of the only people on this world he could have trusted. Many attribute the death of this Norscan as one of the last few bits of humanity that still remained in Wulfric, leaving him forever. For in an extremely rare occurrence, Wulfric had felt grief. Wulfric and his men would not rest for long. As soon as the bodies of his fellow men of the north had been burnt, they would make haste back to Seafang and continue their quest. There, they would be greeted by the sight of his flying ship. Had he been a few hours later, he would have been left to rot within the desolate lands of the Fire Dwarfs, for the Kurgan shaman still lived. Wulfric had been a fool to judge the shaman's death. They are a crafty folk. No matter, he had what he needed, the relic in his possession and the shaman still alive. Soon he will be free from the curse. Soon he can be with his beloved. Seafang set sail, Onskaro its only destination. Wulfric arrived at Onskaro with what little hope his heart could muster. Hjordis was near, he could feel it, and after so much time away, he could see her again. Hope would turn to rage after mere moments, for he had been betrayed once again. This time not by his own men, but the king of the Sarls, the man who had promised his daughter to him and cheated him, from which his heart desired the most, by forcing her to marry the leader of the Aeslings. Wulfric would have killed every man at Onskaro, were it not for Hjordis calming him. He had to remain calm, however, for at least for now he was with her, and soon the shaman would work his magics and free him. None would deny his right to Hjordis in just a few short days. The Seafang was to receive a new crew before departing once again to the location of which the Kurgan claimed he may lift the curse. But first, there was another matter to deal with. The leader of the Aeslings, who the Sarl King had promised his prize to in a grand betrayal, had sent him a challenge. That fool, did he wish to die? No matter, he will make quick work of him, and then be on his way. Wulfric was perhaps too trusting, expecting any sense of honor from the Aesling prince, for he would not fight this day. No, the Aesling had brought a mighty champion for Wulfric to die to, a hulking behemoth of a man whose eyes glowed with the power of chaos. The champion was that of what most Northmen dreamed to be, massive and powerful, with mutations that only further enhanced his fighting prowess. But as yet again, Wulfric would not fail. Even as the champion mutated before his very eyes to powers unimaginable, Wulfric stood strong. His death would mean he would be at the mercy of the gods of chaos. His death would mean losing Hjordis. With surprisingly great effort, the champion lay dead. The battle was won, and once again, Wulfric would assert his dominance, as he vowed that once he returned, he would be wed to his beloved, and any man who dared to stand in his way would be cut down. He would slaughter every man in Norsca if he had to. He would wage war on any people. He only needed a few short days. The Seafang's new crew had been a sorry bunch. They were children more than men, but still they would serve their purpose. If any survived this ordeal, they would be richly rewarded when he married his love and ruled over as king of the Sals. Wulfric had no time to waste. Under the Kurgan's guidance, they would set sail to a place of great power, where magics flowed freely. Ulthuan. Surely this would have been a perilous voyage. Ulthuan is famous for having large sea monsters protecting it, but thankfully they passed in unawares due to the Kurgan's powerful dark magics cloaking them. Ulthuan is as dangerous as it is beautiful. Wulfric knew all too well of the past when many Norscan armies raided to pillage the elven continent, only to be absolutely destroyed. They would need to be swift like the wind. The moment any elf would gain word of their arrival, a mighty warhost would quickly see to Wulfric's plans forever destroyed. Under the shaman's cloak, they would pass unnoticed, at least for now that is. Ulthuan radiated with magical energies, and it was impossible for even the men of Norsca not to feel the power from within. Deeper and deeper they travelled into the high home of the elves, and soon enough, under the Kurgan's guidance, they found what they had been looking for. A place of great power, which interestingly lay unguarded. Only elven women stood between them. Witchers the shaman called them, and they were not to be allowed even a single moment to cast one of their powerful spells. The Northmen readied themselves for Wulfric's command, and when it came, they all fell upon the elves without giving them any proper time to react. The she-elves lay dead, mighty victories turned sour. When it was revealed, the shaman had worked against them since the beginning. The elves were no witches, but simple wives praying for fertility. Wulfric had been tricked. Both times he had been sent to die, and while he survived the Dawi-Zharr, he will not survive the wrath of the elves. Before he could unleash his wrath on the shaman, however, it would be shown that he was just an illusion. The real shaman lay safely in Norsca, while a projected image of him led Wulfric to his death time and time again. He had been cheated and lied to. All this was for nothing, and now he was hopeless and broken. He stood as Ulthuan itself rose to avenge the fallen women, spiritual beings which would not be harmed by the weapons of normal men. They would have all surely died were it not for Wulfric in his despair, shattering the relic of the fire dwarfs, which unleashed a horrible demon that was bound to it. This was their chance. If they did not run now, they would perish, as it was all too sure now that the elves were aware of them. Quickly, Wulfric regained his composure and rallied what men he could. They would make for Seafang before it was too late. Elven knights gave chase, but even in their fury, they were no match for Wulfric and his warriors, who held their ground under his command. The Northmen would hold as long as they could, or their souls be damned. The elves were relentless. Unfortunately, in the stressful times, the loyalties of men are tested, where Wulfric had been betrayed yet again, but made quick work of the betrayers. This was not the time for infighting, lest they all find themselves killed or worse. Quickly, he formed a plan to set fire to the fields around him. The elves would be too busy stopping the fire than to move after them. He was correct. But many more terrors defend Ulthuan, far scarier than that of elven accuracy. Wulfric had arrived to Seafang just in time to see it being destroyed by a mighty merworm, one of the great beasts that defend Ulthuan from the seas. Since this day, Wulfric is one of the very few living beings who has not only fought a merworm in singular combat, but also survived. His rage fueling him as he had seen his ship lost to the ages, it was beyond belief that he managed to harm the beast by himself. Many warriors would sing of this tale for years to come, should he manage to leave Ulthuan. Many of his men lay dead. Betrayal had been rampant, but Wulfric would not die this day. He was determined to return to Norsca, to see his love, and to kill any who stood in his way. He spotted the magical head of his ship in the middle of the ocean. Wulfric held hope that his blood may still summon the demons that guided his ship before. He and one man yet lived through the trek of Ulthuan, another betrayer and coward who would prove to be yet another obstacle in his path in the near future. But for now, he would provide aid, for they had many common enemies, and only when they lay dead would Wulfric challenge him outright. As he had guessed, his blood still awoke the demons within what was left of Seafang, and the two Northmen rode into the sky. Many believe it is not through his force of will, but that of the Raven God himself as to why Wulfric commanded such power. Only a fool would work against the Chaos Gods, knowing full well that they know and see everything. Perhaps at this point, he is little more than an amusement to the gods of chaos. The two travelled within the skies. Wulfric wished to end the shaman for his treachery, but to his surprise, the idol of Seafang did not take them to Norska, but to a place unknown to him. The shaman must be here, he thought, for Seafang would take him to the place where he wanted to be most above all others. They were in the land of the Southlings. With quick thinking, Wulfric and his companion were able to secure a ship, more akin to a small boat, as a small patrol had wandered by to where they had landed. Seafang's idol was tied to this new ship, but Wulfric knew he could not continue his hunt for the shaman. A revelation came that the Kurgan was not a Kurgan at all, but a Southling wizard. He did not have neither the time or patience to hunt for whoever this man truly was. Not yet, at least. First, he needed to return to Onskaro and deal with the betrayers at home. Then, and only then, he would return to seek his vengeance. Even if it meant burning the entire south to the ground, none would escape his wrath. Wulfric now headed back to Norska. Thankfully, the boat was small enough to go unnoticed as he sneaked past patrols, killing only when needed, as to not arouse suspicion. In fact, many believed Wulfric was truly dead, as he heard whispers of the fake shaman returning to bring news that the one known as the Wanderer had finally perished. Maybe this was a good thing. None would expect him as he hid within the shadows, following an all too familiar scent. The scent had led him to a door he had visited many times. The ultimate prize was in that room, but this time its old guard had been replaced with that of another tribe. After dispatching the guard, murdering him in cold blood, he crept closer to the door, listening to sounds from within. Rage flew through his mind, body and soul as he smashed his way into the room and beating one of the inhabitants of the room to an inch of his life, only stopping when Hjordis, who had been laying with this man, spoke to him. Hjordis, how dare she lay with another man, while he travelled the world to seek his freedom, so they could be together and rule the Saals or even all of Norska as king and queen. How many lives died to help him on his quest? How many friends dead? All for nothing. And while he still felt much love, he could not bear to touch her, for she smelt of another man. She smelt like an aisling dog. Wulfric turned to kill the aisling, and he would have done much worse were it not for the intervention of King Viglunda, who had, during the commotion, led a small army of warriors to meet Wulfric. Viglunda begged of Wulfric not to shed any more blood, lest he start a war that may engulf all of Norska. He could have had anything he ever wanted. Gold, warriors, even his daughter. But at this point, Wulfric cared not for riches, nor for love. Wulfric only cared for revenge, and he would have it, or by his dying breath be it. He told Viglunda that he would stay his hand, but in return he wanted aid. To craft a new seafang and raid the Southlings to achieve many riches. While he hated Viglunda and the aisling, he hated the fake Kurgan even more. With that, a deal was struck. Viglunda is a greedy man, and the thought of untold treasures excited him. Of course, he couldn't turn this down. His men were sent away to build this new seafang, whilst Wulfric would keep Hjordis company as he waited. Merely some insurance, in case any wished to try their luck. He had no desire for her anymore. Revenge is all he wanted. No matter how much she pleaded, if he still loved her, Wulfric would not respond. This would be a long few days. The death of the troll tree, the beast that would eventually form part of the new seafang, was not unexpected. The ancient beast would have to deal with the might of the Saals in force. What was unexpected, on the other hand, is Wulfric pushing Viglunda out of the way when the troll tree struck, almost killing him. Feigned loyalties perhaps? Or maybe he just wanted to leave him for last. With his new longship now built, Wulfric turned his attentions to the Empire. A mighty Norse fleet entered the domain of the Empire as they flew attached to the newly built seafang. This was and will be remembered as the time the men of the North used stealth rather than an outright invasion. Wulfric dared not to risk the Empire mustering their armies. They would only be known for when they had landed and ready for battle. Here, a town named Wisborg lay, and Wulfric was sure Zarnath, the so-called Kurgan shaman, who in reality was but a southling wizard known as Ludwig Storsel, was hiding. He remembered the wizard's glowing eyes, and by his will, he and the whole city will burn. Wulfric would challenge the leader of Wisborg, not to personally fight, but in hopes that the Imperial would be foolish enough to leave his gates open after his charge, and that he was. The gates were open, and the Norskins were free to pillage. Many warriors flooded the streets, killing any who stood in their path. The Imperials, while suffering, stood strong against the dreaded enemies of the North. The fighting was fierce. Many talented warriors on both sides fell, but ultimately the Norskins would push the Imperials further and further into the city. No matter who rose to challenge Wulfric, it could not be denied he is one of the finest fighters in the known world. Better men than the Southlings have tried, and they had all failed. A mighty warrior priest fueled with Sigmar's fury had stood against Wulfric, killing many Northmen. But Sigmar did not watch over the Empire this day, for the gaze of the Chaos Gods had been placed over Wisborg. The priest was beaten and captured, a little prize for Wulfric to torture in the future. Most of Wisborg lay in flames. The defenders retreated to the city centre, and his prize was there. He could smell his cowardly scent. The more the Northmen moved, the more the Imperials would be slaughtered. Nobody was safe from the Wanderer's rage, not even those he had former pacts with, for the sole survivor of the Ulthuan expedition was found still yet living, but imprisoned in stocks. One of many betrayers who deserved to die. He would not have an honourable death. Cowards did not deserve that. Without remorse, Wulfric beheaded the coward. None will stop him now. Wulfric moved on to search for the cowardly spellcaster. He was sure he would have him today, and finally make him pay for all the lives lost, and even worse so, making him feel like a fool. Wulfric would find Stossel within his laboratory, confident that his latest desperate attempts at darker magics would save him this day. A mock of an Upshati lay waiting for the Wanderer, brought to life by the mixing of demonology and necromancy. But no matter its powers, no matter what he threw at Wulfric, it was all for naught. Wulfric destroyed the Upshati and swiftly turned his attentions to the wizard. Torturous screams would be heard like thunder in the night as Wulfric performed all sorts of unspeakable acts on the man who had lied to him. He did not intend to make this go quickly, flailing the wizard and snapping his ribs backwards among other acts. Eventually, the wizard lay dead, but Wulfric's hunts were far from over. More traitors still lived, and now his attentions turned to them. Wisborg was now in flames. Many of the Northmen looked to Wulfric. Where were the riches that were promised? They had gathered some precious gems and slaves, but not the untold amounts that he spoke of. Perhaps they were in the next town over. The empire is very large, and there was much killing to be done. Nonetheless, they would follow him to the next town. But another chieftain would need to travel alongside Wulfric, just in case he hadn't been taking too much of a share for himself. Svienborn, the Aisling, the man who married his beloved Hjordis, who had been a thorn in his side since the very beginning, now sailed atop seafang with a hefty bodyguard and ill intentions. He bribed many of the seafang's crew to turn against Wulfric, offering them a fair share of the treasure that lay within the hull. Unfortunately for the Aisling, Wulfric had no need for gold or trinkets. After his journeys and the many betrayals he had suffered, he had no need for materialistic things. He had promised his crew all within the hull. ensuring the purchased loyalties of his men. Wulfric was determined to end his foes. He had no time for petty plannings now, instead keeping to the plans of the Aisling, freeing the captured Sigmarite priest, allowing him to return to the Empire, and to tell the Emperor that if he so wished, he may bring his armies and free the now burning city of Wisborg, where the Norskans will lay in wait. The banner of the Aislings was raised upon Seafang, making the others believe it was now under their control. Wulfric knew of the plan to cut the other ships when they flew among the demons, that he would be blamed, as many died by what seemed to be his treachery. But the tables had been turned, and instead the Aisling shall be blamed. The men of Norska would not die by demonic hands, but by that of the wrathful Imperials, who would soon enough return after the warrior priest gave his message to the Emperor. If these men of the North had any worth, they would fight, and maybe one day the survivors would return to Norska. But they would come with tales of the betrayal of the Aislings. The Aisling prince begged and pleaded of Wulfric not to destroy his name. He offered gold, power, men, Hjordis, but he wanted no gold, no power, and Hjordis was not his to give. It was then when 3 of the Seafang's crew came with 3 simple objects: a small pipe, a burning torch, and a small box holding a snake from within. The pipe was used to open his mouth, and the snake was allowed to slide down his throat, burning the pipe to further push the slithering creature. The Aisling died, with the snake working its way down his throat, and now Wulfric finally turned his attention to the last traitor. Viglunda stood with terror in his eyes as Wulfric walked down the halls of Onskaro, explaining to him of the events within the Empire. War would come to Onskaro. The Sarls will suffer for the treachery of their king. What about Hjordis? Viglunda would ask. Would he leave her to suffer? In truth, Wulfric still loved her deeply, but too many died in her name, thanks to her father's snake-like ways. If she were to suffer, then so be it. Wulfric's soul belonged to the Chaos Gods now. He left Onskaro before it began to burn. He had no interest watching his former life die before him as he uttered a prayer to the Chaos Gods. To Khorne, the face I would have kissed. To Slaanesh, the heart I would have cherished. To Nurgle, the belly I would have filled with sons and daughters. To Tzeentch, the last hope of love. His love for Hjordis was his greatest offering, and now he was truly a servant of the Chaos Gods. Since that fateful day, Wulfric's fame grew tenfold. Many warriors have risen to join the crew of the Seafang, and his visions plagued him still, leading him to many hunting grounds. And when the call to the greatest war the world will ever see was made, Wulfric would answer under the name of those who gave him purpose. For now, the Chaos Gods needed their greatest champions, as the end times had begun. And with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our lore video. I do apologize for the lack of content last week. I have been incredibly busy, but I hope this kind of makes up for it, as it's quite a long video. I've been meaning to cover Wulfric for a while now, and it's been a request from one of my local subs for a while, so I do hope you're happy, Kieran. If you guys did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day, my friends.